Hey everybody, my name is Michael Fielding and I'm a member of the Free Academy. I'm here with Daniel Hefner and we're going to try to talk about money today, but I think we're both ready to admit that we don't really know that much. Oh no, I think it just started. Sorry. Hey everybody, I'm
Okay.
Michael Fielding with the Free Academy. I just did that intro and then I noticed the live icon wasn't up there. Anyways, I'm here with Daniel Hefner. We're going to try to talk about
Hello.
money today, but I think we're both ready to admit that we don't actually know that much about money. So this is as much a kind of exploratory mission as anything. We're both
Yes.
trying to get a little closer to the truth and maybe play off each other's knowledge, but also just kind of express how complicated this subject actually is. And
It's very complex.
yeah, definitely, especially when you get into the Federal Reserve System and just looking through what all these different words mean, and so much of it is the words, I think. But maybe we could
Yes.
start off with something kind of simple and just talk about how does money actually get value? Where do you think value comes from in money, Daniel?
Yes. So I believe that the value of money comes from the fact that other people want to spend money in exchange for goods and services. The fact that people want to use the money is what gives its value.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's the simplest way of putting it. I guess the question that leads me to is how do we settle on a particular form of money versus something else? Like, why do you think we trade dollar bills, for instance, versus, say, apples or bananas or anything else? Hey, look, we got another participant on
Woohoo!
here. Hey, Sean.
Some
Sorry,
interlopers.
mute my thing.
Well, let me catch Sean up real quick. I'm here with Daniel Hefner. We were going to try to talk about money today, and I
Whoa.
just asked him where the value of money comes from, and he said
Yes.
that the
Faith?
value comes from the desire, other people's desire for that commodity. So what do you think money's value comes from? Do you have a different answer, or
Uh, well, what money in particular? Like fiat or physical
that's a
or
good point.
Bitcoin or what?
Okay, well, let's say Bitcoin, since we all know you're a Bitcoin advocate. Where does Bitcoin's value come from?
Um, Bitcoin's value, I think, comes from the fact that many people around the world have analyzed the experiment and show support for it. And um, the fact that they know, like, they understand how the blockchain works and how it provides a secure and efficient network, and also, with like with what's currently happening with fiat currencies, they see how it solves a lot of the problems that we're currently experiencing with government issued currency. So I think, yeah, those realms is pretty much where the most of the value comes from.
Do you think somebody has to know all the details of Bitcoin to be able to use it?
No, no.
So I guess I
I
was kind
think
of
I think it helps, and like, if you're curious at all as to why it has value, you're going to run into all those inevitable questions of and take those steps of figuring out, like, the mechanisms behind the blockchain, and yeah, the community behind it all and why it has value. So, and that'll lead you to the history of fiat currency and where we're at nowadays.
So that was my next question is how does fiat currency get its value?
Oh, faith, of course.
Faith. Okay.
Yeah,
How
for
about you,
sure.
Daniel? Where do
And
you
and
think fiat
military power.
currency gets its value from?
Yes, I believe that it comes from the fact that people will exchange that currency for goods and services in the
So in my
future.
mind, it's kind of the same in that both of them get their value because if I'm buying a Bitcoin or if I'm buying a dollar, I'm hoping to trade it for something else someday because I can't eat dollars and I can't eat Bitcoins and I can't
Right.
do anything good with them other than trade them for something else someday, right? So I think the
Yes.
Right.
value is in your your assumption that somebody else has demand for that good or that commodity. Did you say that's right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, how about the change in value? So recently we've seen the dollar being losing value pretty consistently for, say, the past few decades or really 100 years. Um, and Bitcoin has fluctuated a lot. So I guess those are providing us kind of two different examples of how money can operate. In one sense, um, it can be devalued year after year, and in the other, it can fluctuate. So, how do those value changes come about, do you think? Let's say Daniel first, if you want to go.
Okay, yes. So the value of the currency. Oh, hang on. That's a motorcycle.
No
Uh,
worries.
yes, the value of the currency is essentially a function of the supply of the currency in the market and the value of the other goods in the economy. Um, the variations in the supply of the money and the value of the goods basically changes the value of the currency in the market.
Yeah,
Is
that
that
makes
is
sense.
that thrown out of whack though when we have quantitative easing, where we're just adding tons of liquidity to a market where, we're adding, say, what was the states doing? I'm not sure what their QE program
Yes.
is. Or is it 40 billion? Um, but then it's not necessarily changing the value of the items in the market.
Well, essentially, quantitative easing is a tool to help the economy by adding money to the money system. The money provider, the Federal Reserve in this case, hopes to increase the spending in the economy, thereby improving it.
Real quick, let me hop in and say exactly what quantitative easing is for those who don't know, because it's a tricky phrase, and I think a lot of people just equate it with money printing or increasing the money supply, which it does, but it does it in this convoluted way. So the way it actually works is a big bank or a credit union or any depository institution can buy a treasury bill from the US Treasury, which is a bond. So they're buying it with cash. And now they have a piece of paper that says, in the future, the government will give me X amount of money plus interest. Whatever they just paid, they're going to get that much money plus interest. So now they have this piece of paper that says, I'm owed money. And what they do is they'll sell it to the Federal Reserve, who will pay them with cash. So they started with cash, they end up with cash, but in the meantime, they sold their treasury to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve gives them freshly minted money. And minted is a funny word because they're not actually striking any paper, they're not minting a coin, they're just entering it in a database. And I like to call it proof money because it's coming from thin air. They didn't get that money from anywhere. They made it up in order to buy the treasury. So that's how the money supply is increasing because this money that didn't exist before is now in the hands of this bank. And from there, now their reserves are higher. They can create more loans, which then creates more money out in the more broad economy. But it's super tricky, and that's one thing me and Daniel were talking about before we got started here is just how all these different mechanisms are so convoluted, especially for laymen like myself, and I don't know if I'll call you guys laymen, but for the experience, it's hard to understand how, and they
You're
use so
right.
many words and everything, it makes it tricky.
Yeah, and especially initially when we were like 18 or 19 years old looking into it, like that's when it's kind of like I liken it to learning about religion when I was growing up, and you just everyone around you acts as if it's legitimate, but you just have this funny feeling deep in your stomach that tells you that something's not right, but you don't necessarily have the wherewithal to like understand and put the pieces together. And yeah, it makes total sense that you don't, because it's such a convoluted and tricky situation to unwrap and unravel. You have the world's leading economists that still haven't done it. So, yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, why do you guys think we use Federal Reserve notes? Like, why are we using the US dollar when we trade? Sean, not that much. He's using Bitcoin. He's using the New Zealand, whatever you call it, the dollar. But
Yeah, yeah, New Zealand dollar.
why do you think people in America use the dollar?
Yes, I have an answer for that.
Okay.
I think it's essentially an extension of our number system. We need a way to efficiently and conveniently represent value in the economy, and our money system is a direct extension of that.
I think that's true that we need a counting device, to figure out how much a hamburger's worth or how much a
Well,
computer's worth. We need some kind of, way of avoiding barter where we can trade something that's worth a lot for something that's worth a little by using money as a medium of exchange, to where when I sell something expensive, I don't have to get 1,000 eggs or something. I can
all
get,
right.
$100, and then I can buy a few eggs if I want eggs, and buy some other stuff if I want other stuff. But I don't know if that really gets to the key of why are we using the dollar versus something else. There are a million different types of money we could use. Silver and gold come to mind. Bitcoin's new, but it's also something that could easily be our unit of accounting. Why do you think we're using dollars rather than these other types of money?
Yes, this was the system we were born into. In fact, I'm an American. I speak English, and I use the United States dollar. That's what my parents did before me.
That's a great answer. I
All
think
right.
that's why almost everybody uses the dollar. Maybe why do you think it got started? Sean, do you want to try to answer, like, why do you think people started using the dollar? Because it wasn't always that way.
Um, right, right. I think, well, it's a more efficient means of exchange. Like, so you don't have to carry around gold or anything with you nonstop and have indivisible or infinite divisible tiny little pieces of gold that you can trade for things as small as like bubble gum. But where we went wrong is when we took the dollars were just the IOUs for the gold and silver, and when we separated that and made the dollars IOUs for the dollars, which are IOUs, that's when it's taken, the dollar is taken out of the realm of, in the paradigm of money, and just becomes nonsense, I would say. I don't even know, I don't have a word for what that becomes, but yeah.
So
It
I
doesn't
have
it
a
doesn't
word
fit
for
the
what it becomes.
definitions of money.
I've been trying to use it a lot lately, and it's one of the line of delineation, I think, and it's between what I call asset money versus debt-based money.
Right.
So I think when in 1933, FDR took away the convertibility of the U.S. dollar for gold, at least
Hmm.
for private citizens. So up until that point, U.S. dollar bills were actually asset money, I think,
Right.
because they did represent an asset. And printed on the bill, you could read it said, "This bill is redeemable for gold on demand at any Federal Reserve bank." And you could go trade your dollar bill, and bill literally means something that you're owed. It's a piece of paper that represents a debt that you're owed. And you could take it to a bank and get your precious metals, and then you could go home and bury them. But after 1933, um, FDR issued a what is it called? Presidential. Anyways, by dictate, he just said all of a
Decree.
sudden
Decree. Yeah.
decree. No, there's another one for presidential um, orders, but I can't it. Anyways, um, after that, like you said, Sean, the bill was only redeemable for other bills, and then all of a sudden it became debt money, um, because the bill literally represented a debt rather than an asset. And at that point, I think things took off in a different direction because of this weird thing where, in order to have any money, you have to borrow money. So, in order for, even if you've never borrowed any money, the only way you can have money is if you traded with somebody who did, or if you traded with somebody who traded with somebody who did. But the only way money comes into existence is if it's loaned into existence. Versus asset-based money, you can create it by literally digging something out of the ground. Or within the past 5 years, there's a new type of asset money where you can create it by solving some hard math problems. That's what I'm referring to being blockchain. So I think something changed radically, and it's because of the interest problem. And if all the money is loaned into existence and you have to pay it back with interest, well, if the entire money supply is debt and you have to pay back all that debt plus something extra, where does the something extra come from? And the only place it can come from is from new loans. And then you have to pay back those new loans with interest, and the only way to pay back that interest is to take out new loans. And it's not an individual thing, so it's not like you as an individual have to take out new loans just to pay back your debt. But as a collective, as a group of people who uses a money supply, we all have to have more debts. We all have to have more debts than there is money in existence, because every piece of money represents a piece of debt, and that goes back with interest. And the only way that interest can come into existence is for somebody else to take on a new debt. So I rambled there for a bit, but
Well, yeah, but and that doesn't even take in inflation to account, like, which would completely, it just makes it that much further out of reach to ever come back to a point of like equalization.
That's actually, I don't think that affects here because debts are written in nominal terms almost always. So when you borrow $100,000, you have to pay back, say, $110,000. But it doesn't change if the dollar gets devalued even by half. So in that sense, sometimes it makes sense to take out a loan if you expect the inflation rate to take off, because say you expect the value of the dollar to get cut in half in the next 5 years, but you can take out a loan and only have to pay back 10% interest over the next 5 years. Then you can take it out, buy some commodity, wait 5 years, and then sell it, and then you'd have all that extra money because the dollar got devalued. It is getting tricky, isn't it? That's
Assuming your commodity stayed at the same price in the meanwhile.
is how tricky money is. But maybe we can go into a new question, maybe about interest rates. So me and Daniel were talking about this a little bit before we got started, about how the Federal Reserve recently increased the interest rate, the interest rate, as if there's one. But Daniel, would you want to talk about what we kind of discovered? What are they talking about when they say the interest rate?
Yes. So most often this refers to the Federal Reserve's benchmark interest rate, which they use for various things, like lending money to banks.
Sure. So, we looked it up a little bit, and so what people usually refer to is called the federal funds rate, which I think is a little bit tricky because I actually didn't know this till too long ago, but the federal funds rate is the rate at which two different banks will loan to each other overnight with their reserves held at the Federal Reserve. So it's not the Federal Reserve actually paying a bank interest. It's, say, JP Morgan Chase paying Bank of America interest. And it's for overnight lending on reserves held at the Federal Reserve. And again, it's getting so complex with these silly words, but I think it's on purpose that they're trying to trick us. But anyways, it's not actually the Federal Reserve paying a bank to hold money with them. It's one bank paying a different bank. Now, a different one we talked about was the interest on excess reserves, which is a brand new thing, actually. So I think that was invented in '09. That's another thing to keep in mind. The entire monetary system of the past 7 years or so is radically different than the 40 before that. Like, it's changed so much. And even that changed radically in 1971. And that changed before 1933. Like, it's constantly changing. And then we're saying the word dollar as if it's the same thing the whole time. And I think that's half the trick, is the psychological, just you getting used to a certain word being a piece of value. Anyways, yeah, the interest on excess reserves, that is what the Federal Reserve will pay, say, JP Morgan Chase, in return for holding excess reserves at the Federal Reserve. And that's about 0.25%. But anyways, that's just getting the picture all tricky. Sean, though, he gave me this awesome book about called The Tower of Basel, about the history of the Bank of International Settlements. Would you like to talk at all about what you got out of that book?
Yeah. Real quick, I want to say something about the convolution, though, like how you say it's getting trickier and trickier over time. I think it's just that, initially people thought that they had really good solutions for some interesting problems that we had in regards to money. And over time, people have just continually tried to come up with solutions to solve our old problems. But instead of being the person that has to say, hey, all of this was wrong and, we've done a really bad job, they just want to be someone who adds something new on, a new layer that fixes maybe a particular symptom and doesn't get down to the root of all of the issues. And so that's when you see things like what you're, how you're trying to explain what's going on with interest rates and what's going on with, figuring out where the money from the Fed comes from and things like that. So I don't think it's like some massive conspiracy that's like all orchestrated by a group of 12 people up at the top or something. I think just over time, it's just a bunch of people who don't want to fess up and don't want to be the one caught holding the ball saying, hey, yeah, we were wrong this whole time. And because that person will be blamed by everyone, and no one will really take into account all the people in history who led that person to get to that point. Tower of Basel. So what I got from that is just that, currently the paradigm is run by central banking interests, the monetary paradigm, that is, and they're essentially trying to orchestrate everything to coordinate in the world, and they run into issues nonstop because they're trying to do so by utilizing this Keynesian economic theory that is, comprised of debt-based assets, like you're saying. And got some background noise, so I'll mute and let's hear what you have to say about it.
I just got started, but it's super interesting to see the history of it. So, for those who don't know, the Bank of International Settlements is kind of like the central bank for the central banks. That's their go-to phrase, at least. And they kind of, I don't know, they set they're behind the scenes. So much of it is backdoor deals. And I haven't got that far into it, so I won't pretend to know that much about the BIS. But the history of it was created to help facilitate the war reparations from World War I between Germany, who lost, and the winners. And basically sent Germany into hyperinflation right afterwards because they just didn't have any money to repay these so-called debts that were just kind of thrown on them by the winners of the war. And their whole economy had been wiped out. All their industrial manufacturing facilities had been literally blown up. So they were struggling to make payments, and so they printed more money, just like every government throughout history. When they run into a problem of, they don't have enough money, they just print more, and obviously that devalued the currency, and literally got to the point where they had $1 trillion. I think it's not a Reichmark. Anyways, whatever their currency was, they had $1 trillion note, or it's not dollar, but anyways, trillion unit note. Um, and then from there, the BIS kind of grew over the years, and now it's helps. I don't know what it does. I have only started the book, but I guess one question I have for you guys: we all, or I am very ignorant on all these things, but I have ideas about where I'd like to see the world go, and and I think a lot of it has to do with changing the way the money works, because money is so crucial to our day-to-day interactions, and it's something that goes unseen. It's almost like, fish in water, they don't see the water. And it's almost like human beings in an economy, you don't see the money as this, you don't see it as anything more than your accounting device. Um, so I guess, given all our ignorance, where would you guys like to see the monetary system go? Do you think it needs to change? Do you think it's good the way it is? And how do you think we should get there? Sean, do you want to start off with that one? I know you've thought about it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, no, I mean, I think something like Bitcoin is the best like experiment we have going for us thus far. I just want to see something that fits the definitions of money. Just the fact that you have to work for it. There's a limited supply. It's fungible, so one Bitcoin equals the same in New Zealand as China, as India, as the U.S., as Texas, down to the cities, down to the villages. It's completely fungible. Um, so what? Fungible, divisible. You have to work for it, and there's a limited supply. And yeah, I want to see something like that. I don't like the fact that there's like these small groups at the top that can control where value is derived from. I like the fact that it's with Bitcoin, it's spread out to everyone. Anyone can mine and anyone can trade their skills for Bitcoin, and seems like a much more fair democratic system in regards to money. I'd like it, yeah, I like it when every person has an equal opportunity to use their skills and value to get money yeah, that everyone has an equal opportunity at. So that's my idea.
Cool, that's a good answer. Daniel, I mean, I know we started off this talk saying none of us know that much about money, but do you have any ideas about, do you like the current system? Do you think it should change? And do you have any ideas of where it should change?
Yes, I think here in America, our money system is set up to get the money to the rich people, ever widening the wealth gap in between the richest people and the poorest people. The richest people have so much money that they can use their money to influence politics, including monetary policy. And we need to reconcile this in the future for the benefit of most of us.
Cool. That's a good answer. Yeah, definitely. I don't think anyone but the richest like the gap between the rich and the poor. So I think almost everyone wants to see that wealth inequality brought into something more reasonable. I'll give y'all my answer. So one of the things I really don't like about the current monetary system is the centralization of power. And I think it's dangerous for several reasons, one of which is what Daniel said. It leads the rich to want to get the rich richer. And but the other is they get deluded into thinking that they know what they're doing. And I think for the most part they don't. And I think it's really dangerous because these people who are influencing all of our behaviors, like we have no idea how much the prices that we see influence our behaviors, but they do. And the people are changing the way all of us act just by adjusting the money supply, and that's very dangerous because maybe they know what they're doing, but I doubt it. The other thing that I don't like is the debt-based nature, and I know I talked about this earlier, but I think it gets the whole economy stuck on this hamster wheel where we're constantly trying to earn money to pay back our debts, but everyone's in this wheel, and there's just no way for everyone to pay back their debts because there's always more debts in the system than money available to pay back the debts. So
More debts.
there's more debt out there than money to pay it. So if every single person took all the money they had and tried to pay back their debts at once, there would be all the money would disappear before all the debts did. Because when you repay a debt in a debt-based money system, the money poofs. Just like it poofed into existence when a loan is issued, it poofs into non-existence when a debt is repaid. So that's the crazy part. We can never get out of debt with the current structure versus an asset-based currency. So whether it's gold, silver, you could have, and it doesn't have to be literal coins that you're carrying around. You can have, like we used to have, paper that represents gold, but as long as it's 1-to-1, as long as there's always 1 ounce of gold for every ounce of gold represented on paper, then you can pay back all the debts and there's still money in the system. It doesn't disappear when the debt is repaid. And I think that's the same with Bitcoin too. Hey Tyler.
Hey.
So I was just going on about the problems I see in the current money system, and I was about to get to my solution. So let me go ahead and say that. I think the trickiest part, and something we haven't hit on yet, is legal tender laws. So, and taxation. But let me start with legal tender laws. In the United States, and in pretty much well, I only know about the U.S., but I think every country who issues fiat currency has a law in place that says you must accept this currency as a payment of debts, and that's for the judicial system. So whenever there's a dispute, the judge and the jury the judge can influence the jury, but they will force a creditor to accept the legal tender as a payment of debt. And that creates demand for that currency. Hey, again, Sean. Then there's the taxation part, which also creates artificial demand for the currency, because so everyone's required by law to pay a certain amount of this legal tender to the government every year. So they have to have it, otherwise they will get picked up and taken into a cage. I use the word kidnapping a lot. My family has been complaining about that terminology lately, so I'm trying to avoid it, but essentially you're going to get jailed if you don't pay your taxes long enough. So what that does is it creates demand for that currency, because you can only pay your taxes with that currency. You can't pay your taxes with Bitcoin, and you can't pay it with gold or silver. So what that does is it forces people to hold dollars, at least for a few days a year, right before they paid their taxes. And that creates this artificial demand for that particular type of currency and drives up the price, because anytime there's increased demand for something, the price goes up, which means the value of the dollar remains a little bit consistent. We all know it falls year after year, but that's the reason we can't all flee away from it, at least not until we have the courage to rebel against legal tender laws and taxation. As long as people are afraid of being thrown in jail and they continue to use the dollar out of that fear, then the dollar will be valuable, because I know that Tyler has to pay his taxes. So I know that he wants dollars eventually. So I know my dollars will be valuable because Tyler doesn't want to go to jail. So
Well,
if you look at that macro scale, it influences everyone to hold dollars where otherwise they might not want to.
That's not a concrete situation though, and I think it's actually a pretty genius business idea and something that we could do. Is that we could be the ones who accept Bitcoin and then liquidate that and pay people's taxes for them. I mean, obviously you have to understand that with the volatility of it, there will be times where like we're not in operation, where like the price doesn't necessarily work in our favor, so therefore we can't operate. But at least we could start a business like that where where we take the Bitcoin and then pay taxes off, and it would take away, at least 100% of the time you wouldn't have to operate in U.S. dollars. Like it would maybe it's only 75% of the time, but still we're doing we're showing people that you can take away that paradigm and that it's not absolutely concrete and there to stay.
But do you see how in that situation we would be the ones creating demand for the dollar because we're the ones buying dollars with Bitcoins. So we just pass the buck from, the government to us. Now we're the ones stimulating the demand for dollars because we're trying to buy it to pay somebody else's taxes.
Right.
There's still a demand in the system.
But still, we are taking the fall so that instead of 100% of people paying their taxes in U.S. dollars, it's maybe only 98% or 99%.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I guess every step is better. My ultimate solution is working up the courage to rebel against the IRS agents with shotguns coming to our houses and defending ourselves from that violence.
So I have
I think that's way farther down the line than what you're saying, Sean. So I don't know. Let me try to get Tyler in on here. What do you have to say, Tyler? Do you have any ideas?
Well, actually, I just have maybe two, at least one general question.
Okay.
So what would the first one is what would the alternative be in your eyes? And then secondly, maybe we'll start with that one. I kind of forgot what the other one was. Yeah.
The alternative to me would be not kidnapping anyone for refusing to use a certain currency. And in that sense,
no.
I'm saying anyone can use whatever currency they want, and let's let the market decide what the most valuable are. So I'm totally cool with people issuing fiat currencies as long as they don't put people in cages who refuse, And if you want to issue a fiat currency and people choose to buy it, that's totally cool. I just think it's unlikely. So then I guess the next part is what do I think is the most likely, say, dominant currency? And I think it would be asset-based. And I think it would fluctuate, too. I don't think any one currency is going to dominate forever. I think we need to embrace the change. But I think, gold, silver, and Bitcoin would be my go-tos. And then, maybe some paper that represents oil futures, something like that. Even that's still asset-based, at least. It's not loaned into existence. It's something. It's not a debt. That's the part I don't like is the debt-based money.
I see. So I take it the idea is something like, let's say that I have to take dollars and I have to sort of use those dollars to buy certain things. Let's say I have to buy a computer, I have to buy whatever it takes to get me a home studio set up because I love making music and I find my fulfillment in doing that and maybe I'm pretty good at it. Okay. And then, but what if I don't make any money off of all of the music that I produce, right? Well, then that seems kind of unfair because I needed all these dollars to put myself in a situation where I could produce that music, but I'm not getting any dollars from that output back to me, right? To sort of make it all worthwhile, I guess, in a monetary sense. So then you're saying maybe if sort of we didn't have one currency that everybody was forced to use, otherwise you get kidnapped, and then it would make room for something like my being able to, I don't know, trade my art projects or trade music for food or something. Like it's a pretty sketchy example, but I mean, I think for the purposes of just trying to give some sort of example, it works. Like, is that sort of what you have in mind, something like that?
Not exactly. So, I love that you brought that up because another one of my friends said something similar on Facebook when I tweeted something about this. They said, so essentially you would like a barter system, and that's not what I want. I think money is beautiful. I think it's a great way of the technical way of saying it would be equilibrating supply and demand, but like of mediating these transactions to where me and you don't have to have what's called the coincidence of desires, where I want what you have and you want what I have. Um, Money facilitates this trade. It smooths everything out to where it makes transaction costs much lower. So all of us win by using money sometimes. I think the difference would be, and I do think certain currencies would become dominant. There's this other saying called liquidity begets liquidity. So whichever currency is most liquid, whichever one is easiest to trade for other things, people want that currency, right? So there's more demand for it, and then more people want that currency because they know everybody else wants the currency, and it's this feedback loop. And I think just like Daniel said from the beginning, once it gets going, everyone realizes that whatever currency we're using, that's what everyone else wants, and so everyone rushes into it. The only reason I think it would be something other than dollars, if we had the courage to defend ourselves from kidnappings, is that the centralized power part in the debt parts, the debt-based money part. So, say we all had the courage and we didn't care about being kidnapped, and we just said, "Come at me," If you want to try to take me to jail, you got to come and physically make me go. And nobody paid their taxes because no one would if they were not afraid of being taken to jail. All of a sudden, there wouldn't be as much demand for dollars. And then people might find a different currency that facilitates trade. And I think it could be one of these really quick transitions, like the MySpace to Facebook flip, for instance. Or say Catholicism to Protestantism in England. These radical changes in what's popular can take place on a really short time scale. Just because once people realize that everyone else is doing it, then they rush into it too. Money is a fad in one sense. It's a long-lived fad,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's all subjective human desires, and whether we value some yellow shiny rock or some gray shiny rock or some series of numbers in a computer like bitcoins are, or even worse, some series of numbers on a piece of paper. It's all silly human subjective values at the end of the day. And what matters is we know we can trade it with somebody else. But no, to answer your question, I don't think barter is the way to go because the transaction costs are so high, and we all lose a little bit because we can't precisely trade what we want to trade in a barter-based economy.
Okay, so maybe I don't fully understand because it seems like to me the way that you just described it, it seemed like I can't see the difference between just using the one currency. Let's just say money, right? You're talking about having several currencies, but if like the utility of each one of those is ultimately the same at the end of the day, right? You can use it to do whatever you do with currency, right? Then how does it not ultimately end up looking exactly the same? You just have a bunch of like different kinds, right? Like instead of paper with numbers on it, right? Maybe you have like little chunks of gold and then little chunks of silver and then so on and so forth.
Right.
So if it's not a barter system, then how is it any different? And
I think what you're saying, like you can use multiple different currencies for different types of transactions. Say you're transacting with someone of Indian or Chinese descent who holds a strong cultural association to gold, like as a precious thing, then you can use gold to do that. But say you have a business deal with a Ukrainian and you're in Australia, then all of a sudden Bitcoin becomes a lot more relevant. And say with like a fiat currency, like he's saying, like say you're just in your local community and y'all have developed a fiat currency that has some sort of backing, then you can just use this fiat currency to like show your allegiance to the local community and show that you want to support them, and B, just use that currency because it's the easiest or most redeemable in your local circle, I guess. But yeah, I don't know if that's what you were asking or what.
Try to answer, because I think you're right. On one level, even today, what we're doing is bartering, but we're just calling, Federal Reserve notes a type of commodity that we all want to trade. Maybe the useful distinction is when one particular commodity becomes so valued merely as a unit of exchange that everyone holds it. And see, there's no line between barter and money, I don't think.
Yeah. Like, and I guess I see what you're getting at is because because right, like like think about how much an apple costs, right? That's sort of like its value in this case is represented in 60 cents or like however much an apple costs, right? But maybe if apples were a certain currency for a certain village, it would be valued higher than what it would be under the system that had just one kind of currency.
Yeah.
And so look, so like I think that ultimately what I was asking there is saying, like, is the problem because how much something is worth shouldn't be determined in, I don't know, because it seems like ultimately that's what money would do too. But I don't know, maybe you can gather something that you think I'm asking.
I have something to say. So one important point is that prices can only be measured by dividing one commodity by another commodity. So in our world, we think of everything in terms of dollars. So like you said, apples are 60 cents. What you're saying is one apple divided by is equal to $0.60. So you're dividing, the price of an apple is whatever it's worth in dollars. But you could say one apple is worth 0.5 oranges, perhaps, or 2 bananas, or one stick of firewood, or you can divide it by anything you want to. So you can only measure prices relatively, I think, is a pretty crucial part of money. And
so then I see. So then that, maybe that's what you're getting at when you're saying that actually it's sort of like the boundary or sort of the line which separates fiat currency from like barter system is actually not so sharp, because what you were just talking about seems like the way you cash out value in a barter system, right? I have apples, you have bananas, and then it's like, look, how many of those things can I get for one of these things in your eyes? And I don't know, they have some sort of calculus by which they determine how valuable it is.
Yeah.
That's why money is such a crucial middleman. What's that? Well, just saying how money. Well, this is a separate thought, but money is such a crucial middleman because, say I have pineapples and you have apples, but you don't want pineapples for your apples. This money
Yeah.
is a middleman that you can use in the meantime to hold and trade for, the pineapples that you want later, or the apples you want later, whichever. And so it's like this. It's this agreed upon, financial tool essentially to be utilized to make deals more efficient and make them happen more, in a more widespread manner, nonstop, so that even though this person, the other person you're transacting with doesn't have what you want, you can still make the deal happen. And that's one more deal that happened as opposed to one that didn't happen, and two satisfied customers as opposed to zero.
Right.
And the amount of transactions, in that regard, the amount of transactions that can happen in a day are, it's an exponential increase.
Right.
Yeah,
And
It's,
also, tell them about the pricing mechanism, Mike, too, like how important price is and what it tells you on the back end that you don't necessarily have to know for yourself.
Yes, I think we're not just bound to our currency by threat of imprisonment. In fact, many people have assets in this currency system, and in fact, this is the currency system which people get paid in. And in fact, we also have a multi-currency system. My mother lives in the United Kingdom, and when I buy gifts for her, I have to pay in euros, of course. So it's easy enough. My credit card does it automatically for a reasonable fee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an important point, I think, is the inertia behind all this stuff. And I think, like we've said a few times now, it's just we're so used to calculating value in terms of dollars that we almost forget that it's a denominator. We forget like this thing the apple is 60 cents, but it could also be 2 bananas or like half an orange. We forget that whole part. We forget that we're dividing by dollars, when we're creating a value judgment. And it becomes so secondary nature that, it's almost like saying the temperature, you don't think of how we're choosing Fahrenheit. You just say it's 70 degrees outside. And these units
It was established.
Yeah, they get established and they're ingrained, and that's why
The
I think
temperature
when there are
of salt water
problems with them,
freezes at
it's
0
hard
degrees.
to get free of them. Scientists have slowly but surely worked away from Fahrenheit and towards, Celsius and then Kelvin because they realized it made their calculations a lot easier. And I think it's the same way with money. If we changed our unit of account to something that it would make more sense to me. I don't want to say it makes more sense objectively, but certainly if we changed our unit of account, the economic calculations would change, and potentially, like Sean was saying, if we can increase the number of transactions per day, the number of voluntary transactions per day, that means every extra voluntary transaction means 2 more happy people per day. So the more transactions that can take place on a voluntary basis means that many more happy people. And I think that's what we're all after at the end of the day. At least that's what I'm after, is a happier population. I don't know, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah. So, okay, so then now maybe a question about the whole idea that you have about us building up the courage, or like mustering up the courage to resist being kidnapped if you don't want to use a particular one currency. The problem seems to be the same, like as if I just impregnated that with the problem, or said that it's a problem. But let's just assume that there's a problem with that, and it could be something like this. You've probably heard people in the past say, like, if we don't buy gas, if like if everybody in the United States didn't buy gas for one day, you know, like X, Y, and Z would happen, and that would be good for us because, you know, like WQR, right? Don't you think that for something like that to actually make a dramatic, like, overnight change is if everybody just kind of clicked on and we just all realized as a collective, like, fuck it, we're gonna, you know, no more fear. Like, I'm like willing to die for like my beliefs, and everybody's just like, we're all on board with this thing because we have faith that it's gonna change things for the better. So yeah, like, come and get me. I bet you don't have enough resources to take us all out, you know, something like that. How do we don't you think that in the process of like reasoning about this stuff, we have to consider that basic fact that people just aren't going to have a consciousness shift or like a sort of like a shift like that, like overnight? So although we can talk about this in the ideal, like it would be best, like, you know, this and this would probably happen if everybody did that. But how do we get them to do that other than in small baby marginal steps, like doing stuff like this on the internet, when by the time it catches on in big enough numbers, those problems are sort of problems of like bygone eras, you know? And then like we're on to something new. So how do we get everybody, like, assuming that your suggestion is actually the best one, right? How would we go about getting everybody to just change like that, you know?
Untold amounts of coordination.
Huh?
Untold amounts of coordination.
Untold amounts of coordination. Well, yeah. So then, okay. So then, like, let's keep asking further. How does that work? How do we coordinate it?
Well, you can't even get that many people to vote. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then.
I don't know.
So then the next thing is, if we end up in the process of our reasoning saying that that's actually probably not going to happen, then like what's the alternative? What's the next best thing? Which is to say, like, don't you have to kind of change something about
yourself?
Yeah, like what you would have wanted originally. You're like, okay, well, considering this, how do we move on from here?
I think it's kind of like
you
to
just
save
stop
yourself.
giving a fuck personally. Huh?
Right,
Sorry.
right, yeah. You put your oxygen mask on first, and then you figure out how to help everybody out. And if there was one solution, then we would do it already. You know, like like going from rotary phones to cell phones wasn't a fucking, no one complained about it because it was an obvious solution. It was there. It's like, oh, well, duh, I'll take an iPhone over a rotary phone for sure. Like, so, yeah, and maybe trying to do this mass coordination is in and of itself one of your steps that you're taking. But yeah, I think regardless, before you're able to tell anyone else about it, you have to be doing it yourself, doing whatever steps it is you think are crucial for yourself, and then help someone else put their oxygen mask on, because then they can take your ideas and how you've played them out in your life and give you constructive criticism on them, and I think they'll be able to help you help them.
Yeah.
Help you help them. Help you help them. Help you help them.
Yeah, I really dig that answer. I have something to add on, I'd say. So yeah, I'm definitely in favor of this marginal revolution, you know, like on the margins. I've bought some Bitcoins, I bought some Litecoins, I bought some gold, and I bought some silver, and I don't hold very much money in the bank. I hold some cash dollars. Actually, at this moment, I don't have very many cash dollars, but there's this other thing that we could do, and it was kind of the start of the French Revolution. It was called the storming of the Bastille, and that's where you actually go and break people out of prison. And if one prison gets broken out, then all those people are now free. I don't know. Again, that's, you know, putting your life on the line. It's probably something that's not very likely to happen, but once people realize that other humans are getting broken out of prison, then all of a sudden the laws don't matter so much, and there's open revolution on the books, and that's a radical change. So that's one thing I think could happen in our lifetimes. People start breaking each other out of prison, and then the laws won't matter so much anymore. But until we get to that point, I'm gonna do things like this. Sharing my ideas online, sharing them on paper, in person, gold, silver, Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies, and getting as much out of the Federal Reserve System as possible, and not paying my taxes. All those. That's the best I can do at this point. So, I think you're right. Like, we can't just ask everyone to wake up and reject, all their fears at once, but push in the right direction. That's all I don't know. That's the best I've come up with so far.
Wouldn't what you're talking about now, though, and what we're all talking about now, wouldn't that be considered breaking people out of prison? You're not working with jailbait, but you're breaking people out of a mental prison, and people that are much more efficient, I would say, and much more ready to consume and digest ideas like these and act upon them.
Maybe, but there are a couple million people in jail, a million nonviolent offenders who, if they were free all of a sudden, maybe they'd be more willing to, work hard on these things. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
You're talking about the well-fed, lazy masses. Things are pretty good for these people. I mean, it's sad to say, a lot of the people. Yeah, a lot of the people in jail. Some of them are mentally ill. I mean, these aren't the best people to lead whatever it is you're trying to do.
Maybe. I don't know. I think a lot of them are mentally capable, and they just got caught with the wrong substance in their pocket at the wrong time, or I don't know. I think a lot of them are pretty capable people, but, I'm making assumptions, so I have no idea.
Right, and only someone who's been in jail long term can speak of the unspeakable violence that you see and the untold amount of stress that you have to live with every day. So I think, yeah, sure, we can reason about it from outside, but we won't know until you've been in that position. It's kind of hard to determine whether they're fit for some sort of revolution that you speak of.
Yeah, but I like the idea that spreading knowledge and trying to enable trying to enable mind opening and stuff like that, that's probably the best way to break yourself out of prison, like philosophies of liberation, right? Like, let's just teach everybody Buddhism, and then it's like you're free to, right? Then it's all just like I'm liberated from your own first person perspective, you don't have any fear anymore. You just snap it out. So go teach Buddhism, Sean. And then it doesn't matter what sort of.
If y'all are down, because I think this is going on a little long, and we've hit on a couple good topics. We should totally do this again, though, and maybe each of us could research money a little bit more, because I've actually read quite a bit, and I still don't know that much, and that's back to the whole complex nature of it. And I think it's artificial complexity in order to hide what's actually going on. That's just my gut feeling. Maybe they know what they're doing, but I think they're chickens with their heads cut off, making up big words just to confuse us all. And but I like what Tyler said about the philosophy of liberation. That's the ultimate route out of all this stuff, and spreading Buddhism and acceptance. Although in one sense I don't like acceptance, because that almost means like complicity in the way things are. I don't know. Any last thoughts before we close it
I think I might like rationality as opposed to Buddhism, or just like take the central tenets that comprise Buddhism. Um, but yeah, sure. I mean, that's a whole nother talk, and I'm about to call Tyler right now so we can talk about it.
Okay. Yeah,
All
because
right.
yeah,
Well, thanks
like I just want to say I don't think that Buddhism would. Yeah. Cool. We'll talk.
We'll do a whole nother
Yes,
podcast on Buddhism. How about that?
Cool.
Daniel, any last ideas?
To precipitate change, you have to go about convincing people who already believe that things are pretty good as it is, otherwise.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is no small feat.
No small feat
Yeah.
at all.
I agree. That's my conversations with my family every time I bring this stuff up. They're like, it's
Right.
pretty good. I'm like, yeah, but millions of people are suffering.
Right.
But,
It's pretty good locally, not globally.